Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Ravi Korishettar, UGC Emeritus Fellow. I am presenting a module on archaeobotany in the subject of Indian culture. Archaeobotany and archaeozoology are twin subdisciplines in archaeology, which help us understand the rise of agricultural way of life, which is characterized by domestication of plants and animals. While archaeozoology helps us understand the processes behind the domestication of variety of animals which have formed part and parcel of agricultural economy, archaeobotany helps us understand the processes behind domestication of variety of plants that have enriched our food package through later prehistoric and historical times. The learning objectives in this module include the presentation to understand how the science of archaeobotany is essential to enrich our knowledge of the origins of domestication of plants and rise of agricultural way of life. Archaeobotany deals with the botanical remains found from the findings from archaeological excavations of pre- and protohistoric sites in India and Pakistan. Further, it also discusses how application of archaeobotany in generating new knowledge of past agricultural systems. The survival of human communities in any given environment is dependent on their ability to ensure the availability of food. Hunter-gatherers procure food through extraction from wild resources, through hunting, plant gathering, scavenging, fishing, and fowling. The period between 12,000 years ago and 4,000 years ago witnessed the transition of prehistoric hunter-gatherers to village-based first farmers and herders in different geographical regions of the old world. This time bracket covers a series of events leading to the formation of the complete package of food crops that characterizes the food habits of the inhabitants of the subcontinent and elsewhere in the old world. Regional dietary habits that once formed the distinctiveness of various culture-historic divisions disappeared during the last 5,000 years with the rise of intensive agriculture. Further, archaeobotany deals with the origins of plant domestication based on recovery of plant remains from archaeological contexts, their identification in the laboratory, followed by processual interpretation of culture change as well as morphological changes in the cultivated plants. Morphological changes in plants is attributed to adaptations to system of cultivation and human harvesting. It is also observed that these changes would have first appeared during a period of pre-domestication cultivation when human behaviors modified the environments and reproduced cycles of plants, especially by the human intervention in the dispersal of seeds. Modern archaeology is increasingly dependent on new scientific techniques to reconstruct the past human activities as completely as possible, as well as preserve the vestiges of the past for posterity. Archaeobotany combines botanical knowledge with archaeological materials. Botanical remains include two broad categories of evidence, one microscopic, another megascopic. Seeds, wood, parenchyma tissue, and plant impression, these are macroscopic. The microscopic remains are pollen, phytoliths, and diatoms, and paleoficus, that is coprolites, for example. Archaeobotanical field and laboratory methods were well developed in America and Europe by the 1960s. Other than launching archaeological investigations at organized excavations, focused archaeobotanical research involves digging trial trenches or small test pits at several early agricultural settlements that can provide a stratigraphic sequence of material culture and soils for recovery of plant remains through flotation. Sometimes large amounts of soil samples are required to be able to recover micro and macro botanical remains. The mid-1960s onwards, application of scientific techniques both in excavations and data analysis with focus on bioarchaeological remains started with Harappan and Chalcolithic archaeology in Western India. Excavations at Inamgaon in Maharashtra particularly addressed this issue of archaeobotany with a full-fledged archaeobotanist working on the material. Until this time, most archaeobotanical research was incidental in Indian archaeology. Though problem-oriented archaeology was advocated by Mortimer Wheeler, it was largely restricted to culture-historic issues. During the last 3 to 4 decades, the archaeology of the Neolithic Chalcolithic cultures in these regions has focused on the role of climate, environmental change, and demography in the rise and development of an agricultural way of life. To date, the best documentation of the transition from hunting and gathering to sedentary agricultural way of life has been documented through excavations and multidisciplinary analysis. The archaeology of Neolithic in these regions is important because many cultivars documented from the subcontinent's Neolithic Chalcolithic cultures were introduced either from Southwest Asia, Africa, or Eastern Asia. So, until recently, the majority of archaeological research pertaining to Neolithic and Chalcolithic cultures was based on a descriptive study of variety of material cultural remains. In the context of Neolithic cultures across the Indian subcontinent, material cultures were taken into account to organize the rise of Neolithic way of life into distinctive provinces. For example, Southern Neolithic, Eastern Neolithic, Northern Neolithic, etc. But with the rise of multidisciplinary investigations at a number of these archaeological excavations, particularly focusing on archaeozoology and archaeobotany, has now given rise to a large body of data pertaining to bioarchaeological aspects of the communities which were responsible for the rise of agricultural way of life. Based on this additional information, archaeologists are now able to identify distinctive agricultural provinces pertaining to the Neolithic and Chalcolithic time periods during the mid to late Holocene times. We can recognize several of these agricultural provinces in this Indian subcontinent. Beginning from the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, Balochistan and the Indus-Saraswati basin area has given rise to a distinctive body of early agricultural developments as evidence from the site of Mehergarh. Now, this region is largely confined to the Kachi plain of modern Pakistan and has now been identified as Mehergarh tradition going back to 9,000 years ago or 7,000 BC. Further eastwards in the Himalayan region, the Kashmir and Swat valleys, we can identify a distinctive Neolithic tradition which has been designated as the Burjahom tradition. When compared with the Mehergarh tradition, the Burjahom tradition is much later in time, wherein we have the earliest dates for the Neolithic going back to about 2500 BC. Further eastwards into central India, a large number of Neolithic sites have also been subjected to biocultural investigations, and bioarchaeological remains have been systematically documented and analyzed, and this has resulted in identifying a distinctive province centering on the Neolithic sites on the river Son and Belen, and this has been designated the Kaimur tradition. For the north of this Kaimur tradition region, we have the Middle Ganga plains, and the Ganga tradition stands distinct because this is the region which has given rise to a debate that is going on till date on the origin of rice cultivation in the Indian subcontinent. The site of Lahura Deva has added to this debate, and the evidence from Lahura Deva suggests the beginning of rice cultivation as early as 5000 BC. East of the Ganga plains is eastern India, which can be designated the Utkal tradition as an independent center of rice cultivation. It means that although we have early evidence of rice cultivation in the Ganga basin, the Utkal region does not seem to have come under the influence of the developments there. So the evidence from some of the sites excavated in modern Odisha suggest the possibility of an independent center of Neolithic culture based on cultivation of rice. Westwards into Gujarat, there are two traditions identified in the region. The northern tradition is called Anartha tradition, and an independent center of millet agriculture, as opposed to the rice tradition, cultivation of rice in central India and the Ganga basin, and cultivation of wheat and barley in the Mehergarh tradition. North Gujarat presents a different picture, wherein the cultivation of local millets has been identified. So the Anartha tradition has now been identified as an independent center of millet agriculture. Banas Valley in eastern Rajasthan has been designated Mewar tradition. Although we do not have typical Neolithic substratum in the excavated sites, the earliest agricultural way of life has been identified based on the archaeobotanical remains and archaeozoological remains, and this has been identified as the Mewar tradition. Western Madhya Pradesh is another distinctive area which is largely covered by the black soil, and a large number of sites which have now been called Chalcolithic sites in the Chambal, Betwa and Narmada valleys have given evidence of agricultural way of life at an advanced stage, wherein the people responsible for this agricultural way of life also had knowledge of copper. So they are called Chalcolithic traditions, and the Western Madhya Pradesh region is also known as Malwa. As a result, the regional early agricultural tradition is called Malwa tradition. South of Malwa is West Deccan, which is covered by Tapi, Lower Tapi Valley, Upper Godavari, Upper Krishna and Bhima valleys. The Deccan Chalcolithic tradition is further subdivided into Malwa and Jorwe cultures, ranging in time from about second half of the 3rd millennium BC to second half of the 2nd millennium BC. Further south of the West Deccan, Malwa and Jorwe traditions, the Mid Deccan has been the focus of Neolithic archaeology for a much longer time. For more than 150 years, Neolithic archaeology has been active in this region, and a large number of Neolithic sites have been documented in the states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, including southern parts of Maharashtra. So these Neolithic archaeological sites have been subject to multidisciplinary studies from time to time, and several sites have been excavated, and re-investigations have also been carried out in light of recent developments in archaeobotany and archaeozoology. As a result, the early agricultural phase of the Mid-Deccan region has now been identified, the ash mound tradition, because the ash mounds, which are distinctive part of the Neolithic landscape, are very, very common in this particular region. And then there is a dichotomy of sites characterized by ash mounds, which are deliberate accumulation and burning of ash mounds, and the habitation sites which are associated with granite Inselberg landscapes. Majority of these Mid-Deccan Neolithic sites are situated on tops of granitic Inselbergs. And further, northeastern region has also been now subject to systematic archaeological investigations to identify the Neolithic phase in that region. Several sites have contributed to identifying a distinctive Neolithic province which has been designated the Brahmaputra tradition. During the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC, a series of regional Neolithic Chalcolithic cultures with clear evidence for mixed subsistence economy emerged across the entire subcontinent outside the Indus-Saraswati basin. While some of these regional cultures have been named after a type site or local river, the others have been designated either Neolithic or Chalcolithic. For example, Aharbanas culture in Mewar, Kaita Malwa in Malwa, Anartha in Gujarat, Savalda, Malwa, Jorwe in West Deccan, Southern Neolithic in the Mid Deccan, and Vindhyan Neolithic, etc. Now, consequences of food production are equally important for understanding the way in which the agricultural way of life contributed to some of these factors. As in his famous book, God and Child defines the Neolithic revolution, which is characterized by self-sufficing economy, that is in terms of food production, increased population growth as a result of sufficient nutrition in the population, opportunity and a motive for accumulation of surplus. It also allowed sedentism, means restricting the mobility from hunting, gathering, nomadism to settled way of life, production of invention of pottery technology, gradually leading to production of textiles that includes cultivation of fiber crops, breeding of sheep for wool, etc. And then tendencies of change in magico-religious notions. Here we have clear evidence of religious practices emerging along with the increasing demand for increasing productivity in the areas where these village settlements had come up. Now, importance on fertility cults linking ancestors with the earth from which crops arise, etc., can also be imagined. Beginning of agricultural way of life also brought about change in dietary quality of food that was being consumed. There was decline in animal foods, which was best source of animal protein, very good source of many vitamins and minerals. There was decline in quality of vegetable food resources. Choice of foods plentiful but not nutritious. Domestication, no necessary improvement in nutrient value. Example, wild wheat, more protein than domestic wheat. Decline in dietary diversity, less access to micronutrients. Example, omega-3 fatty acids, and decline in health as well. It also has had impact on demography, language, and culture. Food production certainly increased fertility in humans, and food production was also prone to failed years because it was dependent on regularity and consistency in seasonal conditions. And it also led to expansion of populations outside the areas which were originally defined, and brought languages and lifestyle changes in human populations. As a result of movement of populations, language families also spread across their source region. The most important process in Holocene human history, what was described as a Neolithic revolution by God and Child, has now been described as the most important process in human Holocene history by Diamond and Bellwood. Here are some of the best books shown on this particular slide, which gives a clear picture of the importance of agricultural way of life, and when and where the agricultural origins occurred, and how different language families expanded from source region to newer areas, and then gave rise to introduction of variety of crops from the source region to the newer geographical environments as well. New Neolithic problems which came up as a result of the rise of agricultural way of life. Sedentism gave rise to diseases. It encouraged spread of many diseases. Permanent houses attract commensal animals like rats and vermin. Mosquitoes colonize the human habitats, and people began to live in enclosed air, which facilitates transmission of airborne diseases. Example, influenza virus. Less interior sunlight. People were not exposed to adequate sunlight, leading to lacking in vitamin D3, etc. And then sedentism also gave rise to generating food refuse, waste accumulation, that is garbage, causing a series of hygienic issues. Sedentism also decreased dietary variety because hunter-gatherers were exposed to seasonal food resources in different geographical environments, whereas the rise of sedentism and agricultural way of life reduced human access to variety of plant food resources. So this particular chart gives an idea of how the transition from hunting gathering to full-fledged agricultural settled way of life witnessed the changes taking place. In the early gathering, in food gathering stage, they were exposed to wild plant food resources and procurement strategies. When wild plant food, when production became a mainstay of human way of life, the replacement planting, harvesting, storage became essential. Management of wild progenitors possibly began to decrease, and range expansion also decreased. Cultivation with systematic tillage led to clearing, land clearance and tillage and so on. Emergence of arable weeds, weed flora, evolution of larger grains, reduction of dispersal aids, etc. Agriculture, cultivation of domestic crops, reliance on cultivation, improved harvesting methods, rise to dominance and fixation of domestic types and dispersals. So earlier agriculture in India has got to be studied from the perspective of identifying native and introduced crops in the archaeological context in different or distinctive agricultural Neolithic provinces across the subcontinent, understanding the environments and climate change, as well as the impact of the climate change on agricultural way of life. And early agriculture can be reconstructed regional in terms of distinctive regions that have been identified as regions where we have wheat and barley being staple crops, rice being staple crops, and millets being staple crops in different geographical regions of the subcontinent, as well as understanding the Neolithic landscapes. Generally, it is believed that landscapes have not undergone major morphological changes since the rise of Neolithic way of life, but at the same time, it is also possible that some micro-level landscape changes have occurred, and in the context of modern expansion of developmental activities, Neolithic landscapes have been obliterated greatly. Therefore, it is essential that we reconstruct the landscape, contemporary Neolithic landscapes, to be able to understand the adaptation of this community to that particular regional and local environments. Issues in the origins of agriculture in terms of what was the basis of the earliest agricultural systems, which crops and when and where, which were the first crops that were selected for domestication, and where this particular transition occurred, and when this occurred. Are these domesticated? The food grains or the grains recovered from archaeological context have got to be examined from the perspective of changes that may have occurred in the plant as well as in the grain. So morphometric evidence, is there an in situ process of domestication? Inferences based on geography, etc., are very, very important to be able to systematically reconstruct the origins of an agricultural way of life in a given area. Where do these crops originate, and when, how do they spread? Because identifying the source of distinctive varieties of food crops that have been cultivated, that have been found in the archaeological context, is very, very important. For example, at Mehergarh, which is the oldest Neolithic site in the Indian subcontinent, the earliest evidence of cultivation of wheat and barley has been obtained. In this context, it is necessary to find out whether wheat and barley are native to that particular Balochistan region, or whether they have been introduced from elsewhere. As we all know, wheat and barley are are found in the disturbed mountain slopes, and they are winter crops. And these are wild varieties of wheat and barley have been identified in Southwest Asia. And those crops which have been evidence of wheat and barley that has been found in Mehrgarh suggests that they are not local in origin, they were introduced from Southwest Asia into this region. And then in the context of this identification, it is necessary what were the cultural process behind their introduction, and what is the biogeography of this particular plant, the plants, particularly wheat and barley. So archaeobotanical evidence becomes very, very important in this particular endeavor to reconstruct the when and where these crops were first cultivated. So as we all know, wheat and barley are winter crops. They are well suited to winter climatic conditions, and so the geographical environments prevailing in Southwest Asia, particularly along the foothills of Zagros and Taurus mountain region, the wild occurrence of wheat and barley have been systematically documented, and the earliest evidence is also documented from the Levantine sites, which is also known as the Fertile Crescent. So in India, in the northwestern region, we have early evidence of winter crops having been cultivated systematically from Mehrgarh times onwards, and they become increasingly popular and dominant food crops cultivated during the urban phase of the Indus civilization. Similarly, when we move towards the southern part of the greater Indus Valley, the Saurashtra region, we have large number of Neolithic sites where we have evidence of cultivation of native summer crops, which are not cereals but millets. So northern peninsular, near eastern crops and South Indian millets and pulses now are getting greater attention by archaeobotanists to identify the presence or absence of independent centers of agricultural origins in these provinces that have been identified in the Indian subcontinent. So domestication in the Levant or the Fertile Crescent has been now documented and very well dated, and begins by about 8500 BC. At this point of time, varieties of wheats were cultivated, followed by barley, lentils, peas, grass pea, chickpea, flax, safflower at a little later date have been found in that particular region. This package was gradually introduced into the Balochistan and Indus Plains region. In the northwestern Rome, local cattle domestication occurred around 6000 to 5000 BC. Cattle is found to be native to the Balochistan region, and sheep and goat was introduced into this region at a little later date, and by about 4000 BC, cotton was also cultivated, followed by sesame and local date palms in the pre-Harappan context around 4000 BC to 2500 BC. So it's not only the spread of crops that occurred in early Neolithic phase, it also led to spread of livestock from among the Neolithic people from about 4000 BC to 2000 BC onwards. There are a large number of sites which have been identified dating in time range from 2500 BC onwards till about 1700 BC. There are some of the examples of wild progenitors of some of the domesticated crops. Pigeon pea or red gram is native to eastern India, particularly Orissa, and its botanical name is Cajanus cajanifolia. And then we have horse gram, which is widespread in the peninsular India, that is also known as Macrotyloma uniflorum. Its earlier name was Dolichos uniflorum. We have a herbarium specimens at a number of institutions in India. These are dry evergreen and savanna vegetation zones, wherein these grasses yielding these two varieties of pulses have been identified. In the Ganges Valley, there is strong evidence of early domestication of rice. The sites such as Damdama, Lahura Deva, Senuar, Chirand, Mahargarh, Chopani Manda, Koldiva, they have given evidence of rice cultivation. The issue that is being debated is its antiquity. While the evidence from the Lahura Deva has now been considered as management of wild rice as early as 5000 BC. In a domesticated context, this rice from these Neolithic sites is not earlier than 3000 BC. Lahura Deva has been excavated during the last 15 years time period, and the excavators have identified distinctive periods of occupation, and each of these occupation periods have been subdivided further. Period 1 has been divided into 1A and 1B. Period 1A represents evidence of rice grains and also pottery, and the time bracket is about 5200 to 4000 BC. And the identified grains have been categorized as wild grains, not domesticated ones, and similarly variety of wild fauna have also been found in this time period. Period 1B, rice, addition of barley and winter crops, dating from 2400 to 2200 BC. Wild fauna indicating continuation of hunting and trace presence of goat. And this is also reflected at a number of sites, particularly period 1B is also been found at the site of Senuar. Period 2, dating from about 2000 BC, here we have evidence of copper objects, domesticated cattle, goats, pigs, etc. Period 3 from circa 1200 BC and continues into Iron Age. Neolithic Orissa has two traditions, coastal plain and Mahanadi traditions. Settlement mounds have been found, and they range in time from about 2500 BC to 1500 BC. These are some of the sites known to have yielded evidence for early domestication of rice and the domestication of sheep, cattle and so on. The site of Golbai Sasan, Gopalpur, Malkhoja and Bajpur and Banbasa. These sites have been systematically studied from the perspective of archaeobotanical research, but the date that we have for this region is about 2500 BC onwards. Odisha region at these sites like Gopalpur has given evidence of early domestication of Pigeon pea, that is Cajanus cajan, and also rice as we know. And the spread of Pigeon pea from Odisha and Bastar region into other regions of peninsular India has also been systematically documented from southern Neolithic sites. Southern Neolithic is again a distinctive geographical area, and large number of sites are found between the eastern slopes of Western Ghats and western slopes of the Eastern Ghats, and in the middle of this particular Deccan Plateau, which is now identified as Mid-Deccan region, we have these varieties of sites across this particular landscape. In the heartland of this southern Neolithic province, which we have called Ash Mount tradition, we have a series of sites which are directly associated with the ash mounds. And then outside the zone of outside the zone, as we move westwards or eastwards, we enter into later phases of the Neolithic. Then westwards towards Western Ghats, we have a series of sites which can be categorized as sites of Haluru tradition, and eastwards of this region, the group of sites have been identified as Kunderu Valley tradition. And in the region of Kunderu Valley, in the Kunderu tradition region, there is a distinctive absence of ash mounds. At the same time, even in the region of Haluru tradition, so far the presence of ash mounds has not been identified. But here, plant subsistence base across 3 cultural zones has been very well established. This also relates to the geographical variables. It also relates to geographical variables, example geology and soils, environmental setting based on the study of wood charcoal. Chronology is also regional variation in the chronology of these settlements. Cultural interrelationships in agricultural spread and crop adoption have also been reconstructed. While the oldest sites so far known are within the region where we have the Ashman tradition, and the younger sites, as we move into the Kunderu Valley, the Neolithic sites are not as old as those in the Ashmount tradition zone. So the earliest phase of the Neolithic in the Kunderu river tradition is dated to about 1900 BC. And the same is the situation as we move towards west of this particular region into Hallur tradition. Based on the excavations and the radiocarbon chronology, Ashmount tradition appears to be much older than the dates that we have so far. Some of the sites like Vatagal in the Raichur though have given us clues to the fact that the early phase of the Neolithic is yet not well established at a number of excavated sites, and the possibility of the early phase dating to earlier than 3000 BC is much more, and a potential geographical area needs to be identified to be able to locate settlements which have a long settlement history indicating a clear evidence for early phase of the Neolithic culture. The Ashmount tradition that has been now seen in the central part of the mid-Deccan ranges in time from about 2700 BC to about 1700 BC. So these sites have also given evidence of horse gram, green gram, black gram, and also evidence of cultivation of millets in this area. Ancient agriculture in India is relatively late in the Indian subcontinent, as both archaeological and radiocarbon dating suggests. The Indian subcontinent could never have been an agricultural hotspot. It lies between 2 major primary areas of cereal cultivation, that is Southwest Asia, where wheat and barley were dominant crops on the west, and Eastern Asia on the east, where rice cultivation was the dominant crop. The Indo-Iranian borderlands on the western frontiers of the subcontinent and the northeastern humid landforms on the east are critical geographical areas that appear to have been passages for dispersal of crops and movement of peoples from outside. The Indian Ocean maritime links further added to the exchange of food crops and horticultural items in and out of the subcontinent. Ancient agriculture in the Indian subcontinent, as elsewhere, is the result of a mixed economy that incorporated cultivation of staple crops and animal herding. These 2 components appear to have emerged simultaneously, though one observes spatial variation in the timing of their emergence in the distinctive Neolithic Chalcolithic provinces across the region. The mixed economy also meant agricultural activities were supplemented by herding, cattle, buffalo, stock raising, gathering wild plant foods, hunting, fishing, and harvesting mollusks. Chronologically, the Indian subcontinent presents itself as an area of secondary agricultural origins as compared with the early centers of Near East and Eastern Asia. The temporal span of ancient agriculture in the subcontinent falls between the 7th and 1st millennium BC as contrasted with 12th millennium BC developments in Southwest Asia and East Asia. Thank you. For more details, you may go to eText, and I am also thankful to Dorian Fuller of the Institute of Archaeology in London for providing the required information in terms of text matter as well as illustrations used in this presentation.